Thanks, Marcia. Well, I'm watching people keep popping on, so we're just gonna give them just a minute to make sure that we get as many on here before we started. 3 of our statewide team. So we are going to go ahead and get started. Today we are happy to have Melanie Jewkes from Salt Lake County. She is going to present to us today about streamlining our work. Melanie is an Extension Associate Professor in Salt Lake County, and she has worked for USU for 12.5 years. She's currently the supervisor in the Create Better Health program in Salt Lake. She loves working for USU Extension and says the best part of her job is learning and relearning some of the things that matter most. Things like living within your means, loving and caring for marriage and family, and growing, cooking, and eating delicious and nutritious food. She and her husband have 4 adorable children, and they live in Murray. They enjoy hiking, camping, and plan to explore all of the U.S. national parks. And she says that they will do that eventually. So I'm sure that with 4 adorable children, it's not that easy to go hop around all of the national parks, but that's an amazing goal to try to do all of that. So, and Melanie has recommended hikes for me and my family, and we have been able to go out on some of those as well. And so she does have some good ideas when it comes to getting out there and enjoying the outdoors. So Melanie, we will go ahead and turn the time over to you. If you need to share your screen, feel free to do that. Oh, there you go. And we are just glad that you're here. And if you have questions, if you'll just put those into the chat box, and we'll come back and readdress the questions at the end. Is that okay, Melanie?
Yeah, totally fine. Can you hear me? Am I being heard?
Yep. You're good.
Okay. It's like my screen's not lighting up, so I couldn't tell. Sometimes that's how you tell, right, on Zoom. But thanks. I'm excited to be here. And this has actually been kind of a work in progress. I was slated for February, and then it was Extension Annual Conference, so they pushed me to March. And then the pandemic happened, and I got pushed to May because some other things took better priority, I think, before then, which is fine. And I'm grateful to share with you some tips. And when I was first asked to do this, I was like, oh, okay, I've got a couple ideas. I don't think it'll take very long, though. But when I started putting this all together, it's like, man, I do have some good ideas. And I am excited to share with you some ways that I've learned kind of through trial and error, but also tips I've learned from others, including many of you who are on the call, and even from books and podcasts and things like that I'll share with you. So today we're going to talk a little bit about finding balance, creating a routine, what exactly is a task management system, using efficient calendar systems or a system, using technology, communicating appropriately, multitasking, and then some great reads or listens too that you might want to check out later. So first, just a little bit about me. I am born and raised in Utah. I grew up in Utah County in Orem and moved to Logan to attend school after high school. I remember when I was in Logan, somebody said to me, oh, you moved from one happy valley to another. And if you've ever lived in both Utah Valley or Cache Valley, you can see what I mean. I definitely did. I studied family finance and did an internship with USU Extension in Cache County with Adri Roberts, and fell in love with all that Extension had to offer. I stayed interning with her for 2 years while finishing my master's degree, and received a job with USU Extension in Duchesne County. And I was there a little more than a year and a half, and after we had my first baby, this handsome guy that you can see the back of in the middle here, after he was born, my husband got a job in Salt Lake after he finished school, and I was able to transfer to a part-time position with Salt Lake County Extension. And I've been there ever since. So we've been in Salt Lake for almost 11 years. And since then, I've had 3 more cuties, as you could see in that picture, and also received tenure during that time. Now, I'm not saying that all to brag, but I do have a lot of people that will say to me, wow, how do you manage all of that? And I only say this to help you understand that I know what it's like to work part-time, and I know many, many of you do work part-time. And I also know what it's like to meet the demands of a county faculty position. Both jobs have their own flexibility, and both jobs can be tricky and take some management techniques. I have a lot of people say to me, wow, you just got it all figured out, don't you? And yeah, sometimes that might be how I look, especially the last few weeks sitting at home, but this is often also how reality is for our family. So this was that same photo shoot where you saw us in the mountains. This was, you know, in between photo shoots, trying to gather up my kids. That's just kind of the epitome of it, I think, sometimes. And it's a good reminder to me that, you know, balance really isn't about doing everything, but balance means doing enough, not doing it all. And, you know, it's easy to think we're busy, and we're busy, and there's so many things, and that's why we can't get anything done. I had an example actually these pictures you're looking at right now, they were taken in October of last fall. And about a month after this photo was taken, I was in a car accident and broke my wrist and had to have surgery, and was pretty much, I couldn't really do anything for a couple weeks. You know, sitting, it was my right hand, and I'm right-handed. Thankfully, with cell phones and smart devices, I could talk text or talk email fairly easily. But I learned then that, you know what, like, you might feel busy, but small things can really just put all priorities out the door. And that's something to keep in mind with balance. And I know all of us have been feeling that again, or at least in a new way with the pandemic. You know, we might have thought we were busy, and then life kind of stopped. And maybe it got busier in some ways. Maybe it's been really slow and boring in others, and maybe it's just a combination of both. You know, balance is sometimes forced on us. And I hope you take this time during this pandemic to kind of use that time to reassess your balance in life. And we'll talk about priorities a little bit later as well. I love this quote. This is from a training I went to in February. It was with the Extension Annual Conference. The lady who taught was Marla D. She actually did not say this, but I forgot to grab the name of the person who did speak this, but it was from a book she had read. But it says, our day is doomed before we even start because we created either an unrealistic plan or no plan at all. And that quote was like, oh yeah, I see that. I see in days that I'm feeling off and I'm frustrated, it's because I probably didn't even create a plan, or I thought I could accomplish so much, and then, you know, life happened and it was unrealistic for that plan. And I think that's a really good quote to keep in mind when you consider this next part I want to talk about, which is routines. So let's talk just a little bit about setting up a routine and how it can help. I love this little picture of the peanuts falling down. I just kind of came across it as I was designing this. How many of us sometimes feel like those peanuts that have crash landed and it's only 10 a.m. You know, or even later in the day when we're thinking we're on a roll, and you know, our routine just flops, and that happens as well. But let's try to be more like that peanut that's hanging on, and set up a system that works for you. Routines really can help maintain order and expectations as long as you're keeping them realistic. Include in your routines what's important to you. So I just wrote down some things that are typically in my daily life: eating healthy, physical activity, getting enough sleep. I am like a sleep fiend. Like, I have to have sleep, and I am so tired come nighttime. Family time, work time. Don't you love? I put work down there. Work is important to me. I do appreciate it, but I did actually kind of purposely put it down on the list. And hobbies, of course, and I don't necessarily mean to put that one very bottom of the list. And of course, there are other things that are probably important to you that need to be on there as well. In your routines, think of time limits that might be appropriate. I would love to have more hobby time, but I am also comfortable with the amount of time I do have to be able to do the things I like to do. So think of time limits as applicable with certain things like this. Where can you be flexible? And maybe even should you be flexible? So I just want to share you a story about when routine kind of messed me up a little bit. This was probably about 10 years ago. And so I had only been in Salt Lake County for about a year. My husband is a school teacher, so he's home during the summer, and usually during the summer, my schedule changes because I can use him to be the parent at home with the children, and I'm at work more often during the daytime in the summertime than I am in the later afternoons. So it was an early summer day, probably one of the first weeks in June, and I was walking up the stairs with a laundry basket. I remember seeing the clock as I was walking up the stairs, and suddenly realized it was like 10 a.m. and I was missing an interview that I had scheduled to hire somebody for the Food Sense program, the then Food Sense program. And I remember just like suddenly realizing I should be in my office right now starting an interview, and I'm still in exercise clothes. And I changed real fast, and I called my office and said, if they're there, just have them wait. And I drove to the office as fast as I could, which isn't super fast when you're in Salt Lake. I think it took me about 15, 20 minutes to get there. And thankfully, maybe the interview was also late. She had to ride late or had been stuck in traffic or something. So we ended up getting there right about the same time, which is pretty ironic. But that made me realize I did not have my routine really set out. And of course, it was this change of time of year where it was summertime and things were different. But I hadn't taken that time to really write it out. And it caused me a lot more stress. You know, I also felt unprofessional. I could have definitely inconvenienced somebody else with their schedule and you know, with their expectations. And so yeah, I would definitely, okay, moving on. I would definitely say we need a routine, and not just have one in your mind, but actually write it out. And this is another tip from that presentation I went to a few months ago, that write down your routine. Write your morning routine. Yes, write your afternoon routine, and even write your evening routine, and tweak them until they work. So I'm just going to share with you one that I created at the very beginning of this pandemic when I was entirely working from home. Just an example, I wake up about 5:45, I exercise about 6 to 7. I'll get myself breakfast, I'll help the kids get breakfast, get everybody ready for, and that takes longer than I want it to, about 7 to 9 a.m. I'll usually work from about 9 to 11:30, and then I'll take a lunch break, and then I'll continue working from about 12:30 to 5, and then we'll do dinner prep, eat, clean up. We'll take some outside time, and then we clean the house, get the kids in bed, and then I have a smidgen of free time on my own before I head to bed, because sleep is a priority for me, a lot of sleep. And this has been so helpful to have that set. And yeah, sometimes I have an earlier work meeting, or sometimes I have a lunch work meeting at 11 and I have to change my lunch. But it has been really, really helpful to tweak this a little bit over time. And I have felt like, and my kids have their own separate routine. My husband has his routine with work, and it's just been really helpful. My kids have been able to do school and have it done with enough playtime in the afternoon. And of course, it's not my ideal schedule. It's not exactly what I want to do, but it has been really helpful. And I would encourage you to write one as well and to tweak it. And to remember, of course, that, you know, we do have to be flexible. Sometimes things will just show up that we have to fit in and rearrange. And that's how life works as well. When you're creating a routine, I wouldn't get too caught up in the exact routine. Like sometimes we just need to do it. Just do it, just get at it. Don't worry so much about writing out every minute, but you know, less planning, and sometimes you just need to jump in and do. So I wouldn't say take forever on this, but just kind of sketch one out, jump in, start doing it, and then tweak it as you need to. And I would also encourage you to be creative in your routine. Of course, we love the word create, right, with our program. And there's so many benefits to creativity, but plan that into your schedule. Being creative really does reroute your brain. It connects memory function and a bunch of other things, imagination, and really that creativity, imagination, and memory recall, they're all tied together. So the more creative we can be, often the faster we can recall information, and the faster and more productive we can be as well. So plan some creative opportunities in your routine, because I used to be I remember when I was in college, I had a college roommate who was very like type A by the book routine. And I just remember thinking, I can't do that. Like I can't set it up that way and stick to it. It's boring to me. But you can still have a creative routine where you're not doing the same things necessarily all the time. So some examples might be what you eat. Some people might prefer to just have a routine of the same lunch every day, same breakfast every day, and that just makes their day more fluid, and they can think less about that and put their energy on other things. But of course, probably all of us would prefer to change up what we eat and be creative that way. How you exercise. So maybe you exercise the same time of day on Monday, but maybe Tuesday it's in the afternoon. And maybe what you're doing is different. And that's a creative thing to do as well. Maybe even where you're holding a meeting, or the types of hobbies you do. There's a lot of ways to add some simple creativity, and I'll share with you at the end of the presentation some ways to kind of rethink creativity as well. I read a cool article about creativity and brain function. And I just want to read one quote real quick from it. It says, in a recent study, we explored further whether the same brain regions support memory, imagination, and creative thinking. Oh, sorry. Oh, no, that is the right quote. We presented research participants with a series of object keywords and asked them to use the keywords to either remember a personal past experience, imagine a possible future experience, or think of a creative use for the object. This design allowed us to determine which brain regions were common and unique to the remembering and imagining and creative thinking. We found that memory, imagination, and creative thinking are all activated but the bilateral hippocampus. The study with visual arts, along with subsequent findings with poets and others, suggests that creative thinking involves increased communication between brain networks that usually work separately. Anyway, it was kind of a fascinating study, but basically it's just saying, like, the more you're creative and the more you use these, the more it connects the rest of your brain together and will really make you more productive in general. Let's talk a little bit about task management systems. In addition to a routine, we definitely need a task management system. So I'm going to share with you a couple of different ideas to think of. And at the end of the slideshow, I do specifically have a podcast for the brain dump idea. So basically this brain dump idea is that you take all of the to-dos that are in your head and you put them somewhere. And we'll talk about where in a minute, but in one place, whatever that one place will be. And it's just everything you need to do, and you're getting it out of your brain and onto your paper. A lot of times we get caught up thinking about everything we need to do, especially when it's almost time for bed, right? And that may keep us awake. So if we can get them out on paper, then, you know, it's an actual physical response that we are putting it somewhere else and we can think about it and do it later. However, sometimes on these brain dumps, we're going to be putting everything, like even dreams and goals and hopes. And I would encourage you to have a separate list for some of these someday maybe ideas that don't really need to go on your to-do list and could clog up your to-do list, so that when you're looking at your to-do list, you're just seeing all these other, oh, I can't do that yet. That's too far out. Today's not the day, instead of seeing the things that you could work on. So consider having a separate someday maybe list. Maybe that's for vacations you want to take, for landscape design you want to do in your yard, for recipes you want to try that you're not ready to do yet, for, you know, who knows what. Not things that you're going to do anytime soon. I don't know if you can see the little picture behind of the man covered in sticky notes. I used to be a sticky note fiend. They were all over my desk, all over my planner, sometimes all over my laptop, so that if I closed my laptop, when I opened it back up, there was one there reminding me of something. And I have worked to get rid of those, and it's been really helpful to have them all in one place, not at my office, not at my home, just all on one list somewhere. The important part of once you've got this to-do list all listed is to focus on 3 to 5 projects at a time. And so you might have a to-do list that says something like, work on class next week. But what's that next step? And sometimes this next step is so simple, it's hard to even think of. Like maybe the work on class next week, that's the project. And, you know, maybe the simple next step is open my email and check on what the partner requested. And, you know, that's such an easy step that you almost hate writing it down. You're just going to want to open your computer and do it. But that's what you'd want to do, is determine, okay, this is my project. What are those next tasks and the next steps I need to take? And that's what your to-do system should become, are these tasks, so that you actually see one thing and you can actually like cross it off like it's one thing you can get done. Projects likely will take more time than the time you can sit down to do them, but hopefully the tasks you can complete, you know, within a few minutes or so as you're working on them. And I've found helpful, a big helpful thing for me with this task management system is to review often. And I do this in a few ways. When I start to work in the morning, I'm looking over my list on what I said yesterday I was going to do, and I'm making sure it still lines up. Did I have anything else come up that I forgot about? You know, did my boss call me? Did something else come up that I need to do in front of those? And then at the end of the day, I'm also reviewing to say, okay, I got these things done tomorrow or the next time I'm working, I need to do X, Y, Z. And I spell those out so that when I sit down the next day, I've already delineated what I need to do. And of course, that's not just for work. It helps with home projects and personal projects as well. I'm going to share with you some ideas for just streamlining your calendar system in general. And I've tried a few over the last few years, and I kind of use a variety, and sometimes it seems confusing to people. You don't need a humongous system to do what you need to do, but you do need something that works for you and that you can find when you need it. So if it's a little pocket planner like this picture up here that fits in your purse and it's just with you everywhere you go, if it's a desk calendar and you're often at work, then that might work if you're always there at your desk looking at it. Of course, tablet smartphones are also great ways to have it. And if you have those with you most times, then you have access to those. Or even just, this isn't necessarily like a bullet journal, but kind of looks like a bullet journal or day planner. There's lots and lots of ways to have one. And what is helpful if you can get one with alerts so that it can remind you when you have things happening. Work sharing is also great. We do that with our Google Calendar in our program. And hopefully you with your supervisors and educators are using those together so you can see what's happening. There's a lot of different apps to do it, and I'm going to share with you. Our smart devices, not just our phones, but if you've got smart speakers, you can also speak to them and they can help you remind and alarm and alert when things are happening. You can also set these things up to be family sharing. My husband and I share one on our phones so that if anything applies to both of us, you know, it shows up in there. And of course, paper versions where you can open them up and see them all at once. So I'm going to share with you a few ways to do this. Oh, yeah, this is kind of just showing you what I'm going to show you. So I'm going to show you some examples of calendars. We'll get back to that in a second. So if you don't already do this, I found out a few weeks ago some of my staff weren't, so I taught them how to do it, and they said it's been super helpful. So this isn't, the far left side is a picture of the phone, my locked phone, and it popped up here. This was last week that I had a meeting the next day. This calendar invite came up on my phone. Now, when I opened up my calendar down here in the bottom right, it says inbox, and I had a little 1 on it. When I clicked on that, I can accept it, and then it is imported into my iOS calendar on my iPhone. And you can do this if you have a smartphone that's not an iPhone as well. So I'm just going to walk you through real quickly how to find instructions for how to do this if you don't already have it set up to do this on your phone. First of all, I want to point out that when you log into your USU.edu calendar in Outlook, there's this little waffle up here in the left corner. If you click on that waffle, you can click on your calendar, and then it will show things that maybe, like the state food center, or sorry, the state CBH office has already populated to my calendar. They've already done that for us, and it's super helpful. And then I don't have to search through my email to find the email from Amalia or Marcia saying, what's that Zoom info? What time is it starting? It's already there in my calendar. So again, that's just by this little waffle over there, and you click on calendar to find it. So this is just if you're logged into the outlook.usu.edu for your email. You can also have it put on your phone like I was showing you earlier. And what you'll do is go to servicenow.usu.edu, the same place where you submit your mileage and approve P-card receipts and all that stuff. You'll type in the search bar AgEmail iOS. If you don't have an iPhone, then you can type in you know, what type of phone you have. And then you'll click here on the AgEmail setup on iOS device, and it will pull up a step-by-step instructions on how to get your mail on your phone. And I know some of you don't want your mail on your phone, and that's okay. That's a good way to set a boundary sometimes. But you can still set it up and then unselect mail and only select calendar. And so then you'll get those calendar pushes to your phone. If that is a little too fast for you, I'm happy to go through this. You're always welcome to email me or call me or email me, and we can set up a time, and I am happy to walk you through how to do this. It's pretty simple, pretty fast, and again, you'll get those pushes to your phone when you have calendar invites through USU email. You can also download your Zoom app on your phone or tablet, and if you log in with your information, then it will sync to your calendar, And you'll see here, I just did a test one last night. Like I set up a Zoom meeting on my home screen. It started calling me when the Zoom started. It was like, hey, it's 10 o'clock, and my phone actually kind of started ringing. And you can set that setting in your settings, what kind of sound you want it to make. But it was reminding me that I have a Zoom call, and all I would have to do was open it, and I'm automatically in there, and I can, unmute or unvideo myself or whatever. That's super helpful. There have been times when I've forgotten I have a 9 o'clock Zoom, and my phone suddenly ringing. I'm like, oh yeah, good thing Zoom remembered for me. So that's another great way that you can set that up, streamline it. It's ready to go, as long as you have that app in the calendar and they use their IT magic to sync with each other so that it tells you when you have a meeting. Another app, while we're talking about apps, this isn't necessarily calendar related, but I use one called the Cam, as in camera, Cam scanner app. And I just have the free version. You can pay for it if you want, but I've never needed to. But this is an awesome app. It kind of looks like a camera. It will take a picture of some papers and turn it into PDF. So I do this a lot. I'll take photos of my receipts, turn it into a PDF, and then I email that PDF to the extension workflow to be uploaded into the system or whatever. It's super helpful to have, especially if you don't have a scanner at home, where so many of us are working at home right now, or if you're often heading to the office just to scan stuff. That's an easy app to use and easy to email from there. Something else I've done a few years ago, about six years ago, I can't believe it's been that long ago, I was supervising about 23, 25 nutrition educators over 3 counties, and about 5 or 6 other program educators, and I had a lot of people to work with. And again, as I said, some of this I've learned through trial and error, and I've appreciated people being patient with me learning. But one thing I found is I set up VIP notifications on my USU email on my phone so that I wouldn't miss emails from my employees, so that if they were emailing me, it would come through as a notification on my phone. I don't always recommend notifications on your phone because it's hard to kind of turn off when you're working and when you're not. But because I was kind of spread a little thin and had a lot of people also working part-time in different hours, I did that as a courtesy to them so that I could respond to them quickly. I'm sure I still miss them, but that was one way to help me be able to respond more quickly. If you feel like maybe you miss emails that are important, that's one thing you could do, is set a VIP notification on, maybe from your supervisor or maybe from the state office when there's things that come up fast or something like that. So that's an option. Or maybe from a partner. Maybe you're working with a partner, or you're waiting to hear back from a class that you want. You can set them as a VIP, so as soon as you hear from them, you see that on your phone. So that's another idea as well. A big thing is, let me just go back real quickly. Technology can be a huge help. And if you're using a smart device that can give you a reminder and alarm, that's helpful. Smart devices can also be used for notes, so that your notes are all in the same place if you like using technology that way. Some programs like that are just a note function that kind of comes up by default, or an app program called Evernote also works. There's also a lot through Google, and then would sync to your desktop as well. There's a lot of different systems, and I've played around with a few trying to find one that works for me. And I would suggest, if you're looking, to kind of do that as well. Just kind of try and see what works for you. I use my phone a lot, and I'm sure many of you do, to take pictures of my odometer while I'm traveling for work, or I'll use it in my note section. But sometimes I'm in a hurry and I forget to open my notes, and I just quickly take a picture, and then I have my odometer and I have the time stamp from the photo too, so I know at this time I was leaving this place, and I have my mileage. Another great app I use often on, or not just an app, but also the program, is Google Drive and Box, and you can also get those as apps. And you can also have a Google Calendar app on your phone. So if you wanted to separate like your personal and family calendar, you can separate that from your work calendar by using a separate app completely. You can also use the same app and then deselect on maybe the times you're not working, so it's not showing up. So there's a lot of different functions. It doesn't really matter what system you use as long as it works for you. So if you're feeling like what you have right now doesn't work for you, I'd suggest, trying something else out. talk to some of your friends and colleagues to find out what's their favorite and just give it a try. I would definitely, especially for the benefit of the state Create Better Health office, consider the calendar pushes for their meetings. It's super easy to just have it right there. You accept it, it's in your calendar, and it will remind you that you've got a meeting in 15 minutes, which is really helpful. Okay, another streamlined tip is to reuse things. So some things that can easily be reused are your mileage sheets. Now that doesn't mean just submit the same mileage for January that you submitted for March. But if you drove the same places, it's easy to just update the dates, the lesson you taught, and then put in your new mileage, your odometer. And then you don't have to recreate the address of where you went and where you came from and those kinds of things. So if you're gonna do that, of course, do it carefully, but I usually just save as, and then I work off the new document. Classes and lesson outlines you can reuse. So if you came up with a really good flow that worked great for that maybe longer food demo or shorter one, you know, keep those lesson outlines so you can reuse that. Recipes that work great, of course, reuse, and not just reuse again in 3 months, but maybe that's the one you do the whole week. And, you know, that week is just the recipe you're doing. Activities you come up with in classes that work great. You don't always have to reinvent the wheel. And sometimes children love to do the same thing. If you're teaching youth, they love the same game they played a couple weeks ago. So you don't always have to create new. So consider reusing to kind of streamline your time as well. All right, let's talk a little bit about prioritizing. This could be, I'm still learning about prioritizing, and it could be a huge lifelong thing, right? Is that we're learning to prioritize. Thinking back to that first slide about, or one of the first slides about balance, and what we've all probably learned and hopefully had a chance to reflect on during this pandemic is, you know, how have you felt balance-wise in your life? And that might probably will enlighten you on the priorities in your life also. So that's not so much what I want to talk about right now, but I do want to talk about, okay, you're sitting down to work right now and you have a long list of to-dos and you've designated, you know, 3 to 5 projects that you want to do now. Now, how do you decide which one to do? And we're just going to talk about maybe 5 things that can kind of help you decide what to do now once you're in that setting. So one is importance. You know, how important is it that you do it today? Is it due today? That would fall in line with the urgency. This is urgent, I've got to get it in, there's a deadline. Those probably have priority over the others. But other things to consider are your energy. I usually have more energy like this time of day, and late afternoons, I'm a little more sluggish. I feel like I need a little nap. So if it's something complicated, if I'm trying to write a grant or a report, or, you know, maybe I'm in, you know, got to be in pairs, putting in stuff, and that just takes a little more energy to type up that success story that you heard about. Maybe that's how you're going to frame it. What's your energy right now to do that task? Are you high energy, ready to face it? Or I need something that's a little, you know, less energy intensive. Another one is time, the time available. So do you have a meeting in 10 minutes? You only have 10 minutes to do something. Maybe you're not going to do one of the longer ones that take a bigger chunk of time. Location also. So do you have, you know, are there things you need to accomplish that task that are in your office and you're stuck at home, or vice versa? So that could also, you know, help you prioritize what you do first. Keep those things in mind. And then once you've kind of gone through those, basically you look at what's remaining and decide what's going to give you the highest payoff. So with the energy you have, the time you have, the resources you have with you, what's going to be the best payoff for you to get done first. Now, I'm sure some of you have noticed, I know I noticed this too, most things take as long to complete as the time you give them. So I could sit down right now and start working on a report, and if I don't really, you know, say, okay, I have until 11:30 when I want to break for lunch, I might keep going, and suddenly I miss lunch, and it's like, oh, I didn't even notice. I got so into what I'm doing. There's this cool method called the Pomodoro, I don't know if that's how you say it, Pomodoro Technique, and I'll give you the link to it at the end of the slide. But really the main idea is give yourself 25 minutes, and you kind of like a HIIT workout, you just pound through as fast as you can, as well done as you can in 25 minutes, and then you take a 5-minute break. And the theory of this is because we spend as much time working on something as the time we give it, we will be more productive. We will pound out more things because we limited it to 25 minutes, and then we can move on to the next task of that project, the next 25 minutes after taking a small break. And I know that can be helpful for me too, especially if I'm doing something I don't want to do. I'm like, okay, I'm just going to give myself 25 minutes and I'll see where I get. And then I'm usually motivated because I got pretty far, and then I have more energy to keep going. So that's a great way to try to, especially when you might be balancing other, like kids at home. You know, maybe they're outside playing. Quick, I have 25 minutes. Let's see what I can pound out. It's not, that might be another idea to consider as you're prioritizing. Okay, the next thing I want to talk about is communicating appropriately. I recently took the Master Remote Work course that you might have heard about that USU Extension is doing from some of our fabulous colleagues. They've done a great job putting that together. And one of the things they say is just communicate. If you're a remote worker, you're not in an office with your colleagues, which is a lot of us all the time. Even if you do have an office, a lot of the work we do is away from the office. But it's super important to communicate, communicate, communicate. And I later found this quote. It says, the single biggest problem in communication is the illusion that it has taken place. That is huge, I think. And I think it happens a lot with us as we're working connectedly together all across the state. I think we do a lot have that illusion that communication has taken place. We think sometimes that, you know, you sent the email, so it's good and done. The word has been spoken. You know, you said it in a meeting, so you're good. You said it in a training, you're good. You said it in a class as you're teaching people, so you're good. I really liked what Caitlin Waters said last week when she was talking about teaching the refugees and immigrants learning English, that she was taught, don't stop repeating when people get it right, but you keep repeating until no one gets it wrong. I think if we adopted that more in our communication, that would be super helpful. You know, keep repeating things so that it's not, oh, we did it right once and then I forgot and I messed up again, but it's a constant communication. So I'm going to share you some tips on things I've learned that have been really helpful to kind of streamline this communication so that we, I mean, sometimes, yes, we're going to spend more time communicating, but it just makes it more effective and productive. So definitely want to listen and take notes, and don't assume that everybody's going to remember everything and follow up when needed, but let's talk about how we follow up. So first is emails. So anyone who's ever had an email should know that it's not so easy to stay up on top of everything via email. I don't think we should expect replies from email within a day necessarily, like hopefully, you know, within 24 hours, but where so many of us work part-time, most of us aren't on email every day. Or all day, every day. And so keep that in mind as our jobs are so varied, as we're out teaching classes or we're prepping for classes or we're working on projects, email is probably not something that's always on that we're constantly answering. Some of the best ways to use email include attachments or links to files. Maybe just a single item you want to let everybody know, like a single policy change that can be easily deciphered and read via email. If it's something larger, maybe you need to consider a meeting versus an email. Generally, emails should be kind of short and sweet, not huge and long. Good old-fashioned phone calls. I have come to use the phone a lot more often the last few years. If I find myself typing up a big long email to my staff, I'll sometimes catch myself, hopefully. If not, sorry, guys. And then I'll be like, okay, wait, I'm putting too much in here. Maybe I should just pick up the phone and call this person. And I can get a lot done in a two-way communication that's happening at the same time between somebody and me, instead of waiting for email responses and getting it back and then typing up my response and then waiting. You know, sometimes phone call is just the best thing to do. I found that to be especially true with our partners. So if we have an agency contact us and say, we would like a class, when could you come? I don't just respond back and say, oh, sure, do you meet our target audience and what days are best for you? I pick up the phone and call them and I explain what our Create Better Health program is, and I verify that they're our audience, and I talk to them about times and the curriculum, and I can do that all in one phone call versus trying to do it over email that might take a few weeks. Often phone calls are probably the way you should go instead of emails, and I'd encourage you to do that more often. Texting or even group chats like Slack or WebEx Teams might also be a good thing to use. My team likes to text, but I try to be aware that I don't want to text them for everything. So this will depend on your job and your supervisor. But you know, we're often not at a computer, so that's something to keep in mind. Sometimes texting is the best way, but should everything be text? Definitely not. So sometimes I'll have a long email and then I'll text my team and say, I just sent a long email, I need a response by tomorrow. And that's just what the quick text is, saying, you know, I need this soon. So those are some other things. But that's one way you could use texting to work to your advantage for quick response. Face-to-face, I think sometimes, especially now, don't you all miss face-to-face? I do. I miss being with people face-to-face. And so I think that's an easy thing for us to say, oh yes, there's definitely benefit to face-to-face work. And there's a time and place for that go beyond the phone, that go beyond back and forth emails, and definitely texting as well. Okay, let's chat a little bit about multitasking. So I know some of you think you're really good at this, and I used to think I was, but I have come to realize I'm actually not so good. And multitasking really means that you're trying to perform 2 or more tasks concurrently, which typically leads to repeatedly switching back and forth between the 2 tasks, or leaving one task unfinished in order to do another. Really, our brain isn't wired for multitasking. It's wired for one thing at a time, one task at a time. And humans usually inflate our perceived ability to multitask. And studies show there's actually very little correlation with our actual ability. Sometimes people can get really fast at switching back and forth between tasks, and it would depend on the type of task, but generally we don't do so good multitasking. So I would encourage you to kind of stop multitasking and to do things like shut your email down when you're working on a project, but have built into your routine a time when you do check your email so that you're not distracted from, you know, you're working away something, you get a little flag on your screen saying, oh, you've got an email from somebody, and you're like, oh yeah, I'm going to answer that email. And in one study I read, it said it takes on average about 10 to 15 minutes to reframe your mind and get back into what you were doing once you are distracted with something like that. So that could be a lot of time, especially when we talked about that Pomodoro technique, that 25-minute things you can like pump out really fast. So pay attention to how you're spending your time multitasking and what you can do to kind of eliminate and reduce distractions. In light of multitasking though, I do want to just share with you a few things I do combine. I wouldn't say, I'm not going to call it multitasking, but these are things that I do purposely combine that help me feel like I'm reaching my hobbies and getting things done at the same time. So a few examples include I exercise with a friend a few times a week. We go running together and we spend the whole time talking, but we're running the whole time. So it's friend time and it's exercise time. And I feel like that's a good multitasking, even though it's really just kind of combining. I love to be outside with my kids, whether that's walks, bike rides, hiking. So I'm getting outside physical activity and fresh air with my family. So I'm combining those times. I love to listen to audiobooks. I don't have a lot of time to sit down and read, or I should say I don't take the time. I'm doing other things. And I also feel like when I do sit down and read, I get a book and sit down, it's like a magnet for all my children. And they're suddenly needing me all at once. But if I can listen to an audiobook and fold laundry, or I can listen to an audiobook and make dinner, or sometimes even when I'm out walking, I'll listen to an audiobook, or in the car. And there are times, however, when I'll admit that I'm listening to an audiobook while driving and I realize I haven't listened at all for like the last 10 minutes. And I'm like, wait, I missed like the last 10 minutes of my book. So even then, that's kind of proof that we're not so good at multitasking. So those are just some examples of things I do to kind of combine things to make me feel like I'm getting more things done, and you know, and that I am multitasking, even though I'm not really. I'm just kind of combining. Okay, so that's kind of the end of what I wanted to share and some tips, and I'm just going to give you some of the resources I have learned from, and then I'd love to take comments on things that work really well for you. and share, because I think we learn a lot with sharing. So let me just walk through these, and then I'm happy to take some of these chats and stuff. So the brain dump I talked about idea, where you're dumping all of your to-do list items and then creating a task list, comes from the Life Coach School, and it's a podcast called Throw Away Your To-Do List. So she walks through more what that looks like and examples of how to do it. There's this multitasking podcast and an article. So I put the link here for the podcast, but if you search the same thing, you could find the article if you'd like to read that one. Inbox Freedom, the Zen Master's Guide to Tackling Your Email and Work. This was a book, an ebook recommended to me by Heidi LeBlanc. A few years ago, I was really struggling with email. I just felt like I was swimming in it all the time. I could never get on top of it. I could spend 8 hours of my day responding and addressing email and could never master it. So this book is great. And actually, you could probably even just Google like managing email tips and find some of the same tips. But a lot of excellent tips for how to manage your email. There's a book called Stretch, Unlock the Power of Less and Achieve More. This is a book that really kind of gets into that creativity and, you know, stretching our resources and our brain capacity to achieve more. Oh, sorry, the font turned out funny on this one. There's a book and website called Getting Things Done, The Art of Stress-Free Productivity. And this was one recommended to me from Marla D that I had mentioned earlier on in this presentation. I've actually had it on hold for an audiobook from my library for months and months and months, and it came to me last week. And some of the tips I've already learned, and some of them I threw into this presentation, and even just from hearing them last week, they've really made some of my daily tasks accomplishing easier. So it's been kind of a fun one to listen to, and there is a website with information. If you've ever heard of the bullet or the dot journal, I actually started one in August of 2018, 19, I can't remember. No, it's almost 2 years, so yeah, 2018, and I have loved it. And I have really moved from, I used to put things in my notes on my phone and it was like, close the app and it's out of sight, out of mind. And I have loved my bullet journal. And I know a lot of people I work with love their daily planners as well. I just like the flexibility of the bullet journal. So I'm not held to the planner printed pages, but either work great. And I actually, it sounds kind of silly, but I read a book on how to use a dot journal. Like, what is it? How do you set it up? What is it for? And started it that way. But this website, bulletjournal.com, also has examples of like super simple ways to do it. And then of course you could Pinterest your life away looking at fun pages and fun ideas. But I have really enjoyed it as a task management system for me to say, this is what I did today, this is what I need to do tomorrow, and to keep track of those kinds of things. But I also use it for fun, like write down books I want to read and things for my kids and stuff anyway. So it's kind of fun, a fun method that you might want to look into if it's something, if you like to, and I'm not much of an artist. Like I don't feel like I'm really good at doodling, but I do just like to write, and I like to open my book and see my notes from the conference I went to last month. And then a couple pages later is my to-do list, and I like having it all in one place. The Pomodoro Technique, that 25-minute, like pound out as much as you can, that's that link there if you want to learn more information about that one. And I'm just going to go back to the page before in case you wanted to take like a screenshot, jot down any of those. And then I would love to take comments or questions. There's a lot.
Melanie, how would
so
you
Casey
like
said,
do you want to just read them yourself and answer them? Is that best for you?
Sure. And then if I miss one or you see something else, pop in, please, Christy, thanks.
Okay.
So Casey earlier had said she loves doing the brain dump on Friday afternoon for the following week, so she doesn't have to think about it over the weekend. I love that too. Like, and one thing I heard in this book that I was recently reading is when we're going on a vacation, we often are really good during that week before the vacation of like finishing things out, closing things up, and, you know, tying off loose ends. And basically this argument is we don't have to just wait for a vacation. We can do that every week. So I love that too, Casey, and that you find that to be helpful for your weekend. So you can dump everything else you didn't quite get to or that you want to get to next week, and then it's on that page and you can get to it when you get back. Kate also said she has a paper planner because I'm old on my paper. I don't think it's because you're old. Technology is great, and I do like the ability to like think on different functions, but there is just something about that connection between the actual hardwiring in your brain and writing things down that isn't the same with texting and talking. So there is a benefit to paper and pencil too, Kate. So I'm glad you do that as well. Darlene said most ambassadors use Google Calendar since we need to list our classes there. She has access to Sarah's classes, and she's tried to link her Outlook and Google, so activities are on both. Has anyone? Yes, I did once figure out how to link my Google and Outlook together, and then it was too much because like it was clogging up. I was seeing everything my ambassadors were doing and everything I needed to do, and so I had to separate it. Darlene, I'll try to see if I can figure out how I did that because I had to undo it, but I'll let you know if I can figure that out. Nancy asked, where do you write down your list of to-dos and brain dump? So I did just mention I do that in my bullet journal. I have, you want to see one? Let me get one. So I wrote one down for just May. It's like, here's my May monthly log. These are everything I really wanted to get done by May, and I've got it listed there. And then you can see like, here's an example of just May 7th of things I did. And if there wasn't an X to it, I had to move it to like the next day to get it done. So I use this for that, but does anybody have a suggestion on where they write theirs down, whether they've got a notebook or maybe they use like notes on the computer or Google Docs or something like that?
I've got a couple ideas, Melanie.
Yeah, yes, share, please.
One of the things that I did, not in this position, but another job that I had is I had a whiteboard that was like seasonal projects. So on the whiteboard, I would just fill it with all the projects I wanted to do that season. And then when I would go into work or whatever, when I had extra time, I would just work on that one. But it was nice because I had a whole, 3 months to work on projects. So it wasn't just like day to day. But then I also, for day to day, I have an app on my phone that's like my wife has one too. I don't remember what it's called. But anyway, I just write like that day, I put the top 3 or the top 5 things I want to do. And then I just click them off. But I guess that's kind of checklisty. So if that doesn't work for you, then maybe that's not the choice for you. But those are some of the things
I think that's great. That's a great example to show how you've determined one that works for you, and that it's a system that works for you for things you want to get done. So yeah, thanks for sharing. Sierra said on the Outlook app, you can set it up automatically to go to Do Not Disturb on weekends. That's great. I didn't know that. And I also didn't mention there is an Outlook app. So like iPhones come with a little email looking blue icon that is kind of like default mail, and you can set it up that way. But you can also download the Microsoft Outlook app, and it's just separate. They work differently, so you can kind of play and decide which one you like better. But that's cool that you can set that up to Do Not Disturb on weekends. Yeah, Hiram, Pomodoro is tomato in Italian. Yeah, they had mentioned that, and I can't remember why they're calling it the tomato effect. I can't remember why, but that website tells you. Email subject line should be the main topic of what the email is containing. Yeah, that can be really helpful and help us remember as we're writing an email. Are we writing 10 things in the email, or are we writing just like, just that subject line? Hiram said, I have to keep reminding myself that multitasking is really switch tasking. Yes, I think we can all do that. And, in that podcast that I shared, they do talk about how as our brains develop, like adults have a better ability to switch between tasks quickly, better than children do. So there is a growth of our brain to a point. And then I think there's also the challenge aspect. So if I'm learning to crochet and I'm trying to have a conversation with somebody, that's going to be really hard. But if I already know how to crochet and I've learned that and I'm just going, then it's probably more easy for me to have a conversation with somebody. So there's a lot of influencers, I guess, into multitasking. Somebody wants to send out these links. Yeah, I can send out the PowerPoint. Oh, it might be too large with all those images, but if nothing else, I'll like copy paste those into an email. Michelle says she uses the Pomodoro technique and really likes it. So that's great. Thanks for sharing that you use it. It helps you take breaks and get things done. Jocelyn's daughter is in college, and a couple of her professors encouraged her to use that Pomodoro technique to succeed in school with numerous academic demands. I could see that. I could see that as a college student. That could be really helpful. I know sometimes I'd be studying and just get lost and bored and wander, but that would help if you knew, okay, I'm taking 25 minutes time. Darlene said Sarah mentioned there are a few Zoom trainings that haven't shown up on her Google Calendar. yet it does appear in the Outlook calendar, which is odd too. Yeah, I have had that, like, I don't know why, but it's happened to me a couple of times, but usually it always goes off. Sometimes I wonder if the Zoom app will like unlog you, and maybe that's the problem. Hiram, Darlene's wondering if you can share the name of the app you use. If you're still on, Hiram.
I am, I'll check.
Okay, thanks. I hope this has been a little helpful. It's not, of course, do these things, check them off your list, you'll suddenly be the balancing king or queen. Like, that's not how it happens. But I hope that using your own experience and even this unprecedented pandemic time, and to kind of reevaluate, you know, what are your routines? How are you feeling about balance in life in general? What systems do you use to prioritize, and are you comfortable with them? Does it work? And maybe what are some of these tips we talked about that you want to learn more about or can start integrating and practicing? And I think that's the thing too, is just try something out. You know, don't worry too much about having it all planned out, but give it a try and then evaluate and review. Review's a big part. If you can review what you've done, review what you need to do, and do that fairly often, that can be a big help. So thank you all for listening today. I hope some of that's been helpful, and I love this program we're in, and appreciate being a part of it. So thank you to everyone.
Thank you, Melanie. And just a reminder, this is being recorded, and it will be on our YouTube channel in the trainings. And Melanie will have you share your PowerPoint with us, and we will upload it to Box, where we've been keeping all of the trainings in the Box file, so that others can go back and you can have an opportunity to click on links and things like that as well. Well, Melanie, thank you so much. I really learned a lot, and you are one that I've always thought, how in the world do you get everything done? That would be me when I talk to you. I'm like, I don't know how she does it all and keeps it all together. So thank you so much for sharing your information with us and the things that you've learned along the way. I know I really appreciate it, and there were a lot of things that I can take and definitely work on in trying to find that balance for myself. So we appreciate that. It looks like Hiram says his wife uses TickTick. He uses tasks. So there's a couple of different ones that are out there for getting those tasks done. So thank you for sharing. Continue. You can use the Facebook page to share if there's specific things that you guys use that you think would be helpful. I love Cam Scanner that Melanie mentioned. That's one of my favorite apps, and so I'm glad that she shared that with you guys, because that's something that I keep on my iPad, and it makes uploading receipts and things like that super, super easy. So there's a lot of different things that we can use, and if we are finding things that we're successful with, it's great if you guys can share what's working for you, because that may be the key to someone else's success as well. So thank you, Melanie. Thanks everybody for being on. We appreciate you, and hope that you have a great week.